welcome to Quoted for Truth for Friday, August 17th. I am Brendan Sinclair. Joining me in the studio, we have Tom McShay.
Hello.
John Davison is off somewhere being a good parent, I'm sure, this time. Let's jump right into the stories of the week so that we can start yelling at each other. PlayStation Vita, resurgent at Gamescom. There's life in the PlayStation Vita. See what I did there? Just in time for the Gamescom press conference, Sony realized that it actually had this portable handheld thing that it wanted to sell to people, and so it came loaded for bear with all sorts of announcements, and, you know, it actually had some of its press conference time devoted to the Vita, which is a stunning turnaround from E3. So let's see, what do they got? Little Big Planet creators Media Molecule are making a 3D Vita platformer called Tearaway. Killzone Mercenary, first-person shooter in the works, and they also talked about their cross-buy promotion. So if you buy games like Sly Cooper, Ratchet & Clank, or PlayStation, All-Stars, Battle Royale All-Stars on the PS3, you'll get the Vita version for free. I'm already a Vita owner. Quite pleased with my Pinball Arcade and my I Love Katamari. Sorry, Touch My Katamari.
Oh, I will do no such thing.
I would not ask you to. It was more of a command.
Okay.
But was that Gamescom press conference enough to get you interested in the Vita, Tom?
Well, I actually really like the Vita. I'm in a different position than most people because I can play it and all its games without buying the thing because I work for GameSpot. But as far as the press conference themselves and what they announced and what they showed, it was really uninteresting, I thought. I'm trying to wrap my head around the appeal of Tearaway, because it looks like a pretty traditional like action-adventure 3D platformer with awful control gimmicks, like blowing and screaming and back-tickling. We went through all this with the DS, and we didn't like it with the DS.
The back-tickling is not necessarily an awful control gimmick.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't played it yet. It might turn out to be fun to put your hands into the playing fields, which is what the thing is, but it looks kind of like a ho-hum game with a cool art style and a bunch of superfluous control methods. So it's like that, and then Killzone is going to be probably not as interesting as good as 2 or 3. So they didn't really show anything that, like, if you're on the fence, would be like, oh, now Sony's clearly supporting this with a bunch of games that are interesting, unique, and diverse.
And it doesn't help at all just that they, like, hey, here's Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, which I know is not your thing, but still, it's like, that's an actual big game coming to the Vita.
There's always portable Call of Duty games. Does anyone ever care? Yeah, there's DS Call of Duty games.
Yeah, but who wants to play a first-person shooter on the DS? Playing it on a system that looks as good as the Vita does, has the twin analog sticks, like that seems to me like a first-person shooter experience that feasibly could be good, whereas the DS one was going to be ass from the beginning.
Okay, let's just say all 3 of these games are totally good.
Okay.
3 games.
Yeah.
Like, is that really interesting? I mean, the 3DS, not to start systems war, this 3DS has a lot of really cool games coming out for me. I mean, because I like Luigi's Mansion, and I like... Are you shaking your head at Luigi's Mansion? And then there's the Fire Emblem, and then there's...
I'm shaking my head at you.
The Paper Mario and the Animal Crossing. Like, there's just more games, and there's a bigger lineup right now. So it's really tough for people who are on the fence and wanting one portable system to side with the Vita right now, because it's more expensive, and the lineup is still... not diverse, and there's not many developers and publishers on board yet.
I've owned the 3DS for like a year and a half now, and I have all of one game for it.
Mario 3D Land?
Yeah, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Mario 3D Land is awesome, and I've played Mario Kart 7, and that's fun. But so much of the stuff is just, it's the same crap Nintendo puts out once a generation for all its systems.
But is it different than what Sony's doing right now? Because these games, it's like, hey, you get like a bastardized version of Killzone and Call of Duty. Have fun, kids.
And Tearaway, new IP.
Yeah. Tearaway is a new IP,
you know?
But it seems like most of this stuff, it's like, hey, Uncharted, hey, Hot Shots. It's like it's not like this diverse, like, look at what Sony's inventing with this. And it's weird that I'm taking negative stance, because I actually really like the Vita, and I really like almost all the games I've played. But I don't think they're doing enough to draw people in.
Well, they're doing more than they were before.
That's true.
HXC Shock in the comments says, starting to remember why I've always loved Sony for my console gaming needs. Now, when we go through these, I try and find some diversity of comments, but there really was, in response to the Gamescom thing, very little negative to say. Dragon Rift said, you know, I never thought I'd ever say this. Sony seems to be doing a lot of things right lately.
Yeah, it just... People get really excited with new IPs, and people are also just excited that Sony's acknowledging the system, which is a contrast from E3. but it doesn't feel like this is something that they're seeking their heart and soul and company future on or anything. It just feels like it's a side project. And I mean, did you hear the development size of Tearaway? It's 14 or 15 people. Like, it's not even the entire. It's not like they're treating this like a Little Big Planet thing where the entire studio. Like, it feels like everything with this is a side project. And it kind of comes across that there's not many games, there's not a diversity of games. Even if everything is good, there's not a lot there.
I'm fine with 14 or 15 people making a new IP game that might be a little bit experimental.
Yeah.
And being given the marketing push that this has already gotten. It's, one of the big games coming out in the Vita now. Franzito, speaking about Tearaway specifically, said, "Cute games make me smile, but they hardly make up for replay value." So
he knows a lot more about the game than we do.
Like I said, I had a hard time finding negative comments.
Yeah.
Fiscal Deal mentioned Soul Sacrifice and Tearaway look amazing. First time I've wanted to buy a Vita. Soul Sacrifice, new IP from Keiji Inafune.
Yep.
All over that.
Yeah, completely. No, that's very cool. I mean, I really want the Vita to succeed, and I really want it to be as good and diverse and interesting as the PSP. But Sony hasn't gotten there yet. So it sounds like I'm negative, but I really like the system, and I want it to be awesome.
So the 3-point shot comes out with the elephant in the room. I want to see them cut the price of the Vita.
They've already talked about that publicly.
And they're not going to this year?
Well, they're not just going to cut the price. They're working on making cheaper components, so the system is cheaper for them to produce. Anyone who's played the system knows this thing is really advanced. Like, they charge, $250 for it right now?
Yeah, or 300 if you want 3G.
Like, it's totally worth it, and it's like so much beyond what I've seen in a portable system. The screen and the technology is amazing. I don't think it's overpriced at all. But yeah, I mean, the mainstream consumer, it needs more diverse games, and it needs more, like, at least we know that this publisher is working on 4 or 5 different games. But I mean, as the year goes on, and you get like a new Assassin's Creed and stuff. Like, there's a real reason to buy this system at least.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks really good. And the price cut at this point, it would obviously spark sales, but they cut the price of the 3DS pretty drastically. A lot more people bought it, but I still don't think that the 3DS has really solidified its place in the industry now. It's Nintendo seems like they're still just kind of like, we've been losing money on this, and
yeah, both of them. It's not the DS versus the PSP again. It's like the Game Gear versus the TurboGrafx Express. It's like neither of them are all that.
Neither of them is successful.
Neither of them are successful.
Whereas PSP and DS, both of them were successful. Really,
people don't recognize that the PSP was awesome and sold awesome.
Yeah, it's like something like 40 million sold.
It's just not the second biggest system of all time.
Right.
Sorry, guys. Let's move on.
Yeah. Gamer expectations curb innovation, says Jade Raymond.
Okay, so Jade Raymond is the head of Ubisoft Toronto, and she says that gamers' insistence on high production values is stifling developers' ability to innovate. There are 30 million gamers out there, but they only buy from the 5 best games. What do you think about this idea? Like, people's expectations and people's standards are so high that it's tough to sell anything unless you have a huge budget and huge marketing push and lots of polish. What do you think about this?
I think in the interest of accountability and everyone recognizing their own part of where the blame lies, we have to say, like, as gamers, yes, we are partially responsible for this. All people, like people in media, they get ultimately what they deserve. And if you buy games of a certain type, companies will make more of that game. If you don't buy those games, the companies won't make them anymore.
Yep.
So the fact that this company keeps making, the fact that any company basically keeps making more of the same, more first-person shooters, more sequels, they do it because it works, and because we tell them it works because we spend our money on it. Now, you can say that those companies are like passing the buck by saying that gamers are the ones stifling innovation, because they can always choose to make something new and innovative and unproven and risky. But that's only part of the blame, because they wouldn't, everyone has a place where they can impact this issue. You do what you can and then hope that the rest of the world kind of also does its part to make things better. As
So-
gamers, we can't just blame the publishers as long as we keep buying the same
Yeah.
stuff that they've been making.
Well, I agree 100%. I think that money talks, and where you spend your money is where development budgets go. But look at it from the other perspective. You are the average gamer, and you buy 5 games a year. You want the best of the best because you're only going to buy a game every couple months.
Right.
Why would you buy something like Lollipop Chainsaw or Never Dead, which are really fun and really interesting and different and janky, when you can buy a game that's polished like Max Payne 3? Like, why would you? What is the motivation for you to want to support this new idea that's not as fleshed out and it's not as smooth and playable as something else like Mass Effect 3? Like, it doesn't.
Because it's interesting. And something that is smooth and fleshed out and perfectly executed on is not interesting. It's
But
like,
this is-
it's like when I go to the movies and, okay, there's Transformers 3 or something, and it's like, wow, that's a big blockbuster movie, and everything looked really impressive, and it was very loud, and the explosions were big. Like, they know how to do a summer blockbuster and marketing campaign that draws everyone in. But that doesn't interest me because I've seen it so many freaking times. Whereas something like Papo EO, which I've only played a little bit with, that is a little janky to me. But I'm fine with that because everything else about it is so interesting, even if the controls aren't perfect.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you're speaking from your perspective, and I obviously mirror your beliefs because I want an interesting game,
Right.
More than anything else. That's what I want.
But the
it's
casual
like-
audience that only finds out about the stuff through TV commercials, how are they supposed to know
Well,
about
not
the
even-
existence of the interesting thing?
Not even that. I remember talking to like a casual gamer last year, and he was berating his roommate who bought Shadows of the Damned, which is a little rough, because it's not that polished AAA experience. So you think even when they're introduced to games that are a little offside the norm, they're not gonna like it as much because it's not as playable, it's not as digestible. And if they just play games for an hour or two at a time, they want Call of Duty, which is just like a science at this point.
Yeah.
Like, it is so refined and so perfect in its execution, and that's what they want. They don't want that game that is a little uneven. And I don't really blame people for that.
Yep.
I think that the problem lies in publishers making a game like Never Dead, like Konami did, which was awesome that they did, and then kind of abandoning it. Because Never Dead needs like a sequel or 2 or 3 sequels, and then it gets up to this level where it's like, oh, this is really fleshed out and polished and interesting. But it's so tough to commit to something that's not necessarily going to sell.
Yeah. That's absolutely. Shadow 4020, he says, you vote with your wallet. When COD clones are the only games selling, those are the only games that will be made. Deathblow 3 adds, what a load of crap. Really, that's your excuse for no innovation? Ubisoft has more excuses. Last time they blamed a lack of innovation on the fact that it wasn't any new consoles. So lame. And actually, yeah, that, it wasn't Jade Raymond, but it was another-
I think Jade Raymond is actually really intelligent with her stances, but what's interesting about her comments is she's very pro innovation and pro diversity. Her studios are not. I believe that
making
she's
Splinter Cell
Black
at,
Flight
at Ubisoft Toronto right now.
which is just it's real derivative, and it's real catering to the violent power fantasy stuff, and it's like, I know that she's better than this, and I wish that she would be like, I'm the head of a AAA studio, I'm going to do something different.
Yeah, well, we don't have an industry set up to look at games and appreciate them as a creative medium right now. When even the people funding them are viewing them as products.
Yep.
You're not going to get any sort of like brave experiments. You're not going to get someone saying, you know what, Jade Raymond or whoever, we believe in your vision for a game. Here's a lot of money. Go make that.
Yeah, Ubisoft's one of those companies that's tough for me because I love them sometimes and I hate them other times just because they do so much interesting stuff and they fall back on these old ideas. But they have Jade Raymond and they have Michelle Ancel under their studio, under their roof. They got to take advantage of their creative talents, and I think, and just like fund interesting games that are maybe smaller, and then other stuff that's money makers.
Everyone talks about the risk of failure, but failure you learn so much from.
Yep.
You learn so much from like if they jumped out of the box and did a Call of Duty that was just completely different and not like the formula that they've laid out right now, even if it flopped, the people that were on that would learn so much more than if they had just made, oh, well, we did World of War, and then we did Black Ops, and then we did Black Ops 2.
Yeah.
And they were all successful, and they were all not very ambitious.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, without the failure that is Kill Switch, we wouldn't have Gears of War. So,
Right.
we need developers who are willing to stick their necks out, even if it doesn't work, which is one of the reasons I really respect what Sony does, because they
invest in failure.
They invest in failure, and it's beautiful for the gamer, and we love it. And
they have had a bumper crop the last few years.
They've had a lot of failures. Can we get to the pun real quick?
Yes.
Jedi Knight 66. So she's saying that gamers today are a bit jaded. It's terrible.
Wah, wah.
I got to at least give him props for trying.
Yeah.
He tried, and he failed, and we love him for it.
We've all learned a valuable lesson through it.
Yes.
Okay, next story. EA, guns, and the dangers of brand identity. GameSpot Australia's Laura Parker wrote this up, and it was an editorial that got a vigorous reaction from the community, we'll say. So EA came under fire this week for a Medal of Honor promotion that saw the game partner with real-world weapons and weapon accessories manufacturers and link to their online storefronts through the official Medal of Honor website. So you go to the Medal of Honor website and it's like, hey, buy a sniper rifle from the game. And then click, you're there.
Oh my god, it's so filthy.
One item that was particularly problematic was an actual tomahawk that had the Medal of Honor branding on it. And after a number of GameSite editorials objected to the practice, EA pulled the posts that talked about them. They shut down the tomahawk promotion. It's sad that we have to say the tomahawk promotion.
Yes.
And executive producer Greg Goodrich told Eurogamer, that was an effort to raise a lot of money for charity, and we were well on our way to raising a lot of money with that tomahawk. But I don't know what will happen with that now.
Yeah. So Brennan and I did contact Greg Goodrich directly today and said we wanted him to do some kind of a video interview so we could talk about this situation, but he declined.
Well, we sent it to Greg and
their PR.
Our main PR contact.
But they did not want to talk to us about it.
The EA PR contact was like, you know what, we'll pass on this opportunity for now.
But I just want to make sure that we got that out there, because we wanted to make sure that we covered this as completely and fairly as possible, but EA didn't really want to talk to us. So now we talk about the information, the facts.
Yes.
So EA is, Danger Close specifically, is making a fantasy land war game that is nothing like reality, because there's no real danger, there's no real
but it's so
fear
authentic.
of death. And they're training you about, okay, this is what guns are like, and this is how they act in this situation when you fight, Navy SEALs or wherever you're fighting. And then they're trying to sell guns that are real and kill people, even though they've just made a game that's the exact opposite of that. So I think it's extremely dangerous of them to present guns in such a fantastical way and then give you the means by which to buy them.
See, I don't actually think that this is a problem with oh, well, you're playing this game and now we're going to give you a gun, then you're going to do something awful with it. I don't think that's the issue here. It's more, this crosses a line for me, because I think our culture is just so, it has this sickening hard-on for guns and for war. We fetishize it, you have all these movies and video games that are supposed to be, oh, look at these brave soldiers. They fight over there so that we don't have to fight here, and it's men of honor and really awesome dudes and everything. It's okay, the sacrifice is made for national security and all that. Those are really selfless. There's a lot of people that go into this and at great personal cost, their lives even, and we do benefit from that. And you can't. You're smirking right now, Tom, because that's the trite. Oh, we love the troops. But the problem is, we indoctrinate people in this country from a very young age, just with these troops and this military action and the wars that we fight are good things.
Yeah.
You know, it's like right now there's Navy commercials on. Talk about the Navy. It's like a force for good in the world.
Yeah.
And that's like, you're a force for the United States in the world. You do good, you know, when you participate in relief missions and things like that. A lot of the things you do are good, but realistically, you are a military power. And the military exists in a lot of ways to wage war. That's what we prepare it for, and that's what we do with it. War, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that war is an inherently bad thing.
I would agree.
If you have to participate in it, it should always be 100% like a regrettable inevitability. I would have avoided this if there were any other way. This is absolutely last resort kind of stuff. Games like Medal of Honor, and to a lesser extent, Call of Duty and more fanciful ones that try, you know, that aren't going for this authenticity crap. They don't just glorify the people involved in the conflicts. They glorify the conflicts themselves.
Totally agree.
Like, war is a crucible that will make you into a man and turn you just into this awesome thing that everyone should hail. And like that's a sick way to look at it. That is like just twisted and inhuman, and this is my problem with this. It's not about whether these weapons are legal to own or if it's easier to get a hold of them through this thing. It's you're promoting war.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the problem is that, like, most people don't have a direct involvement with war. So what they know about war is what they see from commercials and what they see from news stories and what they read in books and see in movies and playing games and all these other third or fourth hand experiences. And that's what they...
Even when you filter that through the common sense thing of like, well, I know that Michael Bay movie wasn't war. It's still, you're judging war based on your interpretation through that filter.
Whether it's conscious or not, or whether you fully buy into it or not, like, your views of the world are slanted by the media you consume. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. So if you are just playing Call of Duty and Medal of Honor, and that is what you know about war, or watching, news stories, or all these things that, like, make war seem fun, and everyone who is in it is a hero that should be revered, you have a very twisted take on what is really scary and really, like, the low point of what human existence is war and killing other people, sometimes innocent, sometimes just because they're ideological different than us. So what this game is perpetrating is dangerous. And then once you make a game that's like, guns are fun, buy guns, like, I don't understand how they could have thought that this message was good. And then they hide behind this, like,
the charity thing.
It's so pathetic and transparent because they're giving money to troops, soldiers who lost their lives from guns, and they're selling guns. It's just so hypocritical. And the fact that they are, like, so blind to this, it's just like, here's what's scary. Like, these are the people who have real impact on how people view the world because they're controlling the media, and they don't realize how much power they have, and they're so fucking ignorant. And it's like reading Greg Goodrich's thing about, like, oh, he wanted to do good with the charity, and he doesn't realize what he's actually doing, says that he should not have a job where he is in charge of what people are doing unless he develops a consciousness and develops and like understands what his message is getting across. Because he overtly is trying to get the message that people are heroes. But it goes much further than that. It goes much deeper than that. So, I mean, I really hope the people of Danger Close, like, start to understand what they're doing and start to, like, affect, and that affects their development, and then they go forward with, like, an idea of, like, how to present war in, like, a smart way as opposed to just, I want to make money hand over fist.
Yeah.
Because that's all they're doing right now is trying to make money for themselves, and that is a short-term benefit and killing the long-term viability of everything. Ugh, I'm disgusted. Yeah. I'm so disgusted.
Yeah. They're also taking, soldiers who have been injured by whatever, and using them as, like, a human shield for these criticisms.
I know. It's like, how can you assault us? This guy was in the war. He likes this game.
Let's hide behind the charity and the.
I know.
So
buy a tomahawk.
The user comments, there were obviously way too many of them for us to go through right now.
Yes.
But here's a few of them. Jume2. It's like buying fast food to support fat people or buying drugs to support drug addicts.
It's a great point.
Gator29. While I've always been a huge advocate of guns, concealed carry is legal in my state, and I'm certified to do so. I definitely think EA is crossing some lines here. There's a huge difference in using a gun while playing an online game and using a gun to defend your life in the real world. Carrying a firearm is not something that should be taken lightly, and if you're going to do so, it should only be with proper training, only in order to defend yourself should something happen. You shouldn't be carrying simply because you think it's the cool thing to do, or you're liable to hurt someone. And I wanted to bring that up because, like, I don't like guns, Tom doesn't like guns, but it's not like people who own guns or like guns are inherently the problem here.
Yeah.
It's not like they're awful people.
This is not our stance at all.
It's not like I don't think people should be allowed to own guns. It's purely just that, you know, the Gator 29's perspective I like because it looks at it in a very sober, solemn way. It's like, I have this for this purpose.
And he understands the danger and responsibility that goes with it.
Right. And when someone treats it with that sort of gravity, it's like, yes, I understand why you would have this, you know? The same way you would hope people treat driving in a car.
Yeah.
You know, a few thousand pounds that can go at 60 miles an hour and you know, do horrible things to a crowd of people. Yeah. It's like, there's something about that sort of, like, power at your disposal that you need to treat with respect.
Totally agree.
And the way a lot of these games treat guns and the way a lot of people defending these games treat it is like it's just so casual, so cavalier that
they're toys.
Makes me think that you're just futzing around with this.
Well, I personal disclosure, I didn't start to get angry about this until I played Call of Duty in 2007, Call of Duty 2. My dad served in Vietnam, and he's a gun enthusiast, you could say. He lives in a state where he can shoot in his backyard, basically. Yeah. That was a big thing for him. So when I told him how Call of Duty 2 presents war, and I've been talking to him about this for years, like he as someone who knows what war is and knows and thinks that, you know, everybody should be able to have a gun, is just so disgusted by this, and he's kind of informing my perspective of, like, how war should be portrayed and how indecent it is what people like Danger Close and Infinity Ward and Treyarch do. So I mean, this is my perspective, is I haven't been in war, but I mean,
perceptions of war have changed so much since Vietnam, because at the time it was, you know, you would have media on site basically, and not being filtered, not being marshaled. Like the army just wasn't really savvy to the marketing message.
Now, it is
the way they are now. Now it's like, oh well, you can't show, you know, coffins of killed soldiers returning home, things like that. Like, we don't want negative images like that, so that people understand the price tag of war back home. Because if they do understand it, they'll be against it, because war is hellish and awful.
Because we all understand it in, like, a distance, like, we know people die, but when you see what goes on, that's, I mean, my dad, he doesn't talk about what he saw, but that's because he can't. So there's another comment from Lahordy.
I'll say Lomedy.
Lomedy. So he says, you're all blaming EA for what was essentially a big part of American culture.
Absolutely.
This is 100% our point. We work in the video game industry, so we latch onto video game things, but the way that war is portrayed in the media, the way that soldiers are treated as heroes, and I have no disrespect for soldiers. Like, I cannot believe that people like that exist and are that selfless.
Yeah.
But then, like, at the beginning of NFL games, you just see, like, we love the soldiers, and it's basically giving the message of be a soldier yourself. I think that's dangerous, and I think the way the news covers it is dangerous, and I think the way movies often cover it is dangerous. We are in the video game industry, so we talk about EA and we talk about Activision. We talk about Spec Ops, who did it right. But I mean, this guy is completely right that we have to get to the source and the kernel of where this is in American culture, that we fetishize guns and violence and war, and fix that. But we're doing it from the top, basically, as opposed from the bottom.
Changing the culture is a pretty big undertaking. So I think the only way it happens is with everyone doing what they have the ability to do to make things in their own little corner of the world better.
And it's having an intelligent discourse and explaining your views and making sure people understand the reality and not the filtered bullshit that EA is giving us.
Let's see. I've also got a comment written down here from Thode Saints. It's the Second Amendment to own guns, and the law requirements are still in effect, so there's nothing wrong here. It's not easier to get the guns just because a game company promotes weapon manufacturers. I think I might have already addressed that, but this isn't about the legality of this, or that it's making this obtaining these weapons easy in a way that they weren't before. It's about the promotion of these weapons and what it speaks to as far as our culture.
Yes, exactly.
So now let's move on to something that might be a little less charged, I hope.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I'm a little exhausted.
You want me to take this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Relax.
Assassin's Creed director defends yearly releases. Assassin's Creed 3 creative director Alex Hutchinson at GDC Europe this week, he said that he finds the argument over annualized franchises to be strange, and he notes that gamers should be concerned about quality rather than how frequently their favorite games come out. I find it strange we've decided yearly's too often, Hutchinson said. If Radiohead put out an album every month, I'd buy it. It's about the quality. He then went on to explain that releasing annual sequels allows Ubisoft to keep the franchise relevant and in people's minds so that the publisher can keep telling the story.
The whole relevant thing is interesting because my first, and I think we talked about this yesterday, my first response was, do you remember that cool first-person shooter franchise, Half-Life? And, and feigning no, we don't remember it because Half-Life 2 came out in 2004. 2007 was episode 2. And that is what I consider, when Half-Life 3 is announced, it'll be the biggest announcement for any game possible. I can't think of anything that would be bigger. So I think it's a little silly to say that you need to have yearly releases for that. I'm against yearly releases because I get burned out. Yeah. I played Assassin's Creed 1. I really enjoyed it. I loved Assassin's Creed 2. I haven't touched the other ones because I don't want to be burned out and bored by it. And now I'm going to play Assassin's Creed 3 because it's still in my mind and I still am looking forward to it. So it's strange that they have such little confidence in their properties that they don't think people will remember them if they don't come out every October.
Yeah. I mean, that really seemed to be the we're just doing this for the dollars admission, is when they said we want to keep it in people's minds so that we can keep telling the story. That's not, if you're a storyteller, you don't, you tell the story when you have the story ready to be told.
When you have a story to be told.
Yeah.
It's not easy to... George R.R. Martin, who I hope is granted a few more years to live because I'm terrified. He takes 5 years to write a book. And when it comes out, people are giddy and rush to buy it because we love Song of Ice and Fire. We don't forget about it. Can you imagine if he cranked that out once a year? It would... The quality would go down. He brings up Radiohead. Radiohead, everything they make is good. It's kind of one of their things is all of their albums are good.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's very impressive. And they reinvent themselves over and over and over again, but they couldn't do that if it was once a month. And we'd be really sick of 15 albums that sound just like Kid A because they can't experiment because they're coming out every month. So that's a weird comparison.
The only way to churn the stuff out that regularly is to make it a formula.
Yeah.
And when it's a formula, you're losing some of the distinctive, unique stuff that would make it.
I know. Yeah, and I expect to see a big link to Assassin's 3 from 2 because they've had a couple iterations with it and they have time to innovate. It also seems to me, and I don't know if this is fair, I kind of assume that there's B teams involved with yearly stuff, and
they're splitting development up between so many different studios.
You don't even know if you're getting the best of the best of the best.
Yeah. James Rayner 72 in the comments said, I doubt we would be having as much COD hate as we do if Activision didn't release one every year. Ubisoft is heading in that direction with the Assassin's Creed franchise. I absolutely agree. I mean, I think the Assassin's Creed 3, the setting of it, looks like it'll shake things up for the franchise plenty for this year's installment. I got no problem with it coming out this year, really, but are they going to do 2 or 3 spin-offs of this before trying another?
They might want that. Yeah, it's funny that since the last Half-Life entry, which was October 2007 with Episode 2, every Assassin's Creed has come out because it debuted 1 month later. So we're talking about 4 main games and all the handheld...
5.
Soon to be 5, and all the handheld spin-offs.
Yep.
And there's the Vita spin-off this year, so
that's
a lot. That's a lot.
We can say that the average, quality of Half-Life is better or something, but if you look at what are Valve's Half-Life revenues since October of 2007 compared to Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed revenues, this really is just about the money. And just because you like, hey, we have some sort of neat ideas that we can explore with these spin-off titles and make it annualized, like that's still pretty different than, you know, doing it because that's the way the story needs to be told. It's doing it for creative reasons.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting how much this comment from, I don't know who said this, Hutchinson, how much this contrasts with Jade Raymond's idea that like creativity is important and polish is overstated at this point, because it's like these guys both work for Ubisoft and they have such idealistic philosophical differences of how games should be made, and I don't know. I mean, I think this perspective is damaging long term, because you can only make so many Assassin's Creed before people get burned out. Whereas
true, but I want to say I'm glad that Ubisoft has a diversity of philosophies as to how to make games. Because we will get different things from them. You know, Michelle Ancel and Jade Raymond and Alex Hutchinson, all producing for the same company, are going to be producing very different games.
Yeah, it seems like Hutchinson's is the overriding thing, because Jade Raymond's development seems tainted. But it's like, if you look at like Zelda, 3D Zelda, like that comes out every 3 or 4 years, and the formula hasn't changed that much. But I know I'm not alone that every time there's a new one, I'm like so beyond giddy. I can't wait, because I love Zelda, and that wait makes me forget about like any problems or the formula and just wants me to jump in again. And like that's kind of the beauty of waiting.
That's a terrible analogy to make.
No, but the thing is, like, that's not even an inventive franchise at this point, but I'm still excited, even though just because there's a gap.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, it's like that's all you have to do is give me like a little bit of space. If there was a Zelda every year, I'd be so bored. But now I'm like, new Zelda, and I get excited.
No. Square Enix fan 13 says, "Oh, don't you even mention Radiohead in relation to such money grabbing."
Yes, isn't Radiohead the
Pay What You Want albums?
Yeah, was that the Rainbow album where you could literally pay 1 cent or $99? Yep. Yeah, they're a little different than pay us for a season pass for Assassin's Creed, please.
Yep. Bonander. I absolutely love having a yearly release of the AC games. I was a little worried at first with Brotherhood, but they proved that they can release quality titles annually. And as far as people complaining about the combat not evolving, well, I think it's perfect. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people that enjoy these games. Kevin Van Ord.
I think this is all of them are really good, and every Call of Duty is really good. I hate on Call of Duty because of everything except the mechanics. The mechanics are outstanding. These games are high quality. Like, it's not a quality issue. It's a diversity. It's an innovation. It's a staleness issue.
And then Kayvon33. Wow, Alex doesn't even respect gamers enough to be honest with them. The decision to make yearly releases is purely financial. They make profit. I do agree in the sense that gamers can't complain about them, at least the ones that are buying these cut and paste jobs. If you don't want watered down yearly releases, don't buy them, and companies won't make them. End of story. And I really like that Kayvon there is actually like acknowledging this is not respectful to the customer, because I think that's something in the gaming industry that we really kind of should be more sensitive to, because so much of the stuff that happens now is like isn't respectful to the customer, and we deserve more respect than we get.
We do. Yeah, that was a good one. This is not as heated a discussion.
Okay, so take it home, Tom. I know that this one is all you.
So, man, I love Rare. So Martin Hollis, who used to work for Rare, spoke at what is it called, the GDC Europe. He talked about Goldeneye, and he talked about what's really interesting. And multiplayer is what defined that.
You mean the Activision revamp?
No, Goldeneye 007 for the N64.
Okay.
So multiplayer is what defined that game, even though the single player was excellent. But the reason people loved it is the multiplayer. He said they whipped that thing up in a month, and nobody at Rare, as far as the higher-ups, and nobody at Nintendo, who owned Rare, 49% of Rare at that time, knew what they were doing. We don't usually talk about specific games there, so we're not gonna dwell on just the GoldenEye aspect of this story. Basically, developers today don't have that freedom, and we kind of wanted to explore why they don't, and if we wish they still did, and what the potential is if you're allowed to just kind of create on your own as opposed to having someone breathe down your deck. So I don't know. Did you have immediate thoughts when you heard this story?
My immediate thoughts is that it was a lot easier when games were that simple to make, you know, a major change like a multiplayer mode in a month. Right now, it's, you know, right from the time a game is greenlit, There's plans for the multiplayer mode. There's plans for the DLC maps, the online passes, the add-ons, all that stuff. And it's all just sort of you're following the template, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that there's still this sort of experimentation that happens, but it has to be so much smaller scale. One, because the games are more complex and the fidelity is so high, and two, because the publishers pay so much attention to all the details and the features that are going to be in the game. If you're making something, they want to know about it. They, they probably asked you to make it. So I think it's really difficult to get this sort of change happening on the download these days.
So I wish I could had a slightly better memory, because I know I've read at least a few editorials about how it was extra credits. Extra credits is a Penny Arcade. They're now associated with Penny Arcade, but they did a thing about pre-production. And you always hear about movies going through pre-production where they kind of write a screenplay and they figure out what they're going to do, and it's like a handful of people. Games don't really have this nearly as much.
Prototyping?
Yeah, well, they don't have like this big extended, we're going to spend a year kind of figuring out what we're going to do before we dive into development, because their games are so expensive and so big. So this kind of ties into that, because you can't make a game that's as complex as Crysis 3 and experiment, because that game is like so cutting edge visually that it takes all of your time and energies to get anything running, basically. So it feels like there needs to be some kind of shift away so you can... I'm always anti-technology, it seems like. There needs to be a shift into something that makes it possible to experiment. Because if you can't experiment, games kind of get samey. And you have to like, okay, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And if you want to do B, you can't afford to do that.
Yeah. So one thing that I think the industry should look at as a model is Double Fine Productions. They've got this thing they call Amnesia Fortnite, where for 2 weeks they split the team up into a few different groups and then just say, make something.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Make something that might be sellable at one point. Make a prototype of a game. Just see what you guys can do with an artist, a programmer, a designer, whatever. We just throw you together. And that produced a lot of their downloadable catalog to date. And it's something that they... Just giving their creative people the room to experiment for 2 weeks with no, if you don't find anything great there, then maybe you learned something from trying something new, but there's no downside to it, It's just they've set aside the time and the money to do that. And that's something that every developer should be doing.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine if EA did that with all of their employment teams. Like how many creative people are working at EA right now on incredibly uncreative games?
The guy who made Papo.io was former EA, I believe.
Seriously?
I mean, you get that a lot.
Supergiant Games.
Yeah.
Greg Kasavin, our buddy, and such. Yeah, they made Bastion. Like, if EA had these people working for them and gave them the opportunity to make these sorts of games in the first place, I mean, how can you tell me that wouldn't be in their interests? Yeah, these aren't Call of Duty killers or anything like that, but it's still really interesting, successful games that will go a long way towards, improving your brand image, maybe?
It's important. I think it's also, just going back to Rare, I love Rare. I think the story is really interesting just because Nintendo had such a hands-off, like, we respect you approach to management with Rare. And Microsoft is the exact opposite, because we saw Rare, they made like Saberman Stampede, which was like this open world, like lassoing animals type game that never made it far in development because Microsoft just kind of cancels everything. And it's just like, I wish that more companies I wish Microsoft would have allowed them to do stuff. And I wish that they embraced this idea of maybe Saberman Stampede wouldn't have sold 5 million copies, but maybe it would have been kind of cool.
They allowed them to do Viva Pinata.
Yeah,
they allowed them to do Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts.
Yep, this is very true. Neither of them were big successes, but I think one of the problems with those is they were really expensive games, and they really should have been shifted to like XBLA or something sooner. But I just wish more companies had the foresight and the patience to be like, we need to nurture their creativity as opposed to put them in a box.
Yeah. And that's also a good way to identify who is really talented.
Yeah.
Anyways. That's all we got for the big stories of the week. So now some quick hits. Next Command and Conquer goes free to play. Tom, are you going to be signing up, enlisting?
This is a bum out. What's happened to my beloved BioWare? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine, and we're gonna keep seeing EA like dabble in free to play until it like blows up in their face. But I don't think most Command and Conquer fans are gonna like the idea of getting nickel and dime to play this game.
Yeah, I know they don't, because if you look at the comments on that story, I don't think I've ever seen any group of commenters that universally negative. How about Resident Evil 6 getting a free online stat tracking service, Call of Duty style, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, it's people see what's popular and rip it off, even if it doesn't relate at all to the franchise. Like, This is not what Resident Evil is.
It's crazy how Call of Duty-esque Resident Evil 6 is. Just, people were already making the comparison anyways after seeing the trailers. And then there's the stat tracking service. Who's going to go online for RE6 multiplayer stats?
I don't know.
And then National Console Support had pre-orders open for the Japanese limited edition consoles. And it just looks like they're Call of Duty logo consoles or something, because it's not even stars. It's just generic military logo insignia on the system. It's awful.
Capcom's trying to kill this franchise, or at least change it so much that it's unrecognizable.
Capcom also, in the quick hits here, reveals Remember Me at Gamescom. New IP, non-sexualized female protagonist with amnesia. Interested, Tom?
Those first two things always sell me on games. From what they showed, I mean, it looks a little DMC-ish, a little Blade Runner-ish. I could go either way with that feel, but I love that they took a risk with this one, and yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, I like it because they saw an external project. Don't Nod is the developer, I think, French studio, and they had this. They'd already showed it at last year's Gamescom under the name Adrift. And now that Capcom's picked it up, it's like, oh, hey, people are going to start caring about this.
Yeah, and Capcom earlier this year had great success with Dragon's Dogma. Like, they're not afraid of new IPs like so many other publishers are. So we'll rip them in one story, embrace them in the next. That is the video game world we live in.
Yeah, love-hate relationship with Capcom total. By the way, have you seen the Mega Man Zero? What's the Over.
Mega Man X Over for the iOS.
Yes.
Which just poops all over that grave. Just smears brown feces all over where his resting place.
So what if we just told all our fans that Mega Man is over? Is that a good idea, guys? Yeah, totally. It's a little on the nose, Capcom. I think we're on to you.
It's a social RPG, and it's just someone who loves Mega Man. Yeah. So tune in to GameSpot in December, where we celebrate his 25th anniversary in a more respectful way than Capcom is.
In memoriam. Because he is good and dead.
Yeah.
This show also, that will do it for this week. I am Brendan Sinclair. That is Tom McShay. John Davison is around. He's in New York right now.
He's in New York right now.
He should be back next week.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I don't know. He doesn't tell us anything. No. But we will see you then regardless on Quoted for Truth.
Where's that camera?